Hello, Math 1. I am back with a new lesson on, you guessed it, factoring. And really, it's a little bit different now because what we're doing is we're using factoring now to solve equations, all right, that otherwise we really don't have the tools to solve up to this point. So let's get to it. On this first equation, we have a trinomial on the left-hand side that cannot be simplified in any way possible. Okay? Now, normally if you guys were in person, I would ask you, like, what would you try in order to solve this equation? I think a lot of students would try to add the 10 to both sides. They try doing things like this, and then I'd ask them where to go there, and then they would give me a bunch of, you guys would probably give me a bunch of bogus things like, oh, let's just try dividing by that 6, and let's just forget that that square's there, and just doing a bunch of things that really don't work mathematically. So, perhaps what we should try, especially if the assignment is use factoring to solve these equations, is to ask ourselves, we know the structure, right? Like, can we simplify this in the way of factoring that we've been doing beforehand? And the answer is yeah. The idea is if we're comparing something to 0, okay, then, well, I'm not going to jump ahead of myself here. Let's factor the polynomial 6x squared plus 11x minus 10. So first things first, is it in standard form? Check. Is there a GCF we can take out? No GCF to take out. So when you do that, then we look at our AC 6 times negative 10, negative 60, and our B value of 11. And ask ourselves, what are the factors of negative 60 that add up to 11? So again, I could roll through all the factors of negative 60. Actually, I'm going to do that. So you got 1 in negative 60, negative 1 in 60, 2 in negative 30, negative 2 in 30, 3 in negative 20, negative 3 in 20, 4 in negative 15, negative 4 in 15, 5 in negative 12, negative 5 in 12, 6 in negative 10, negative 6 in 10. Okay, that's about enough of that. So the difference between the two factors has to be positive 11. Or I guess when you add them together, one's a negative, so you're going to have to subtract. And this one, negative 4 plus 15, fits the bill. So remember, I don't expect you guys to write the whole list down, but if you can't figure it out, I better see the whole list first before you just give up on the problem. Because usually when people give up on the problem, it's you didn't even write all the factors for it. So, negative 4x plus 15x is what 11x is going to change into. So, 4x and 15x. So now we bring in the other parts of the polynomial. 6x squared minus 4x plus 15x minus 10 equals 0. We're just ignoring this equals 0 for now. We know how to factor this part, so that's exactly what we're going to do. So if you group those two together, they're both even and they both have an x. So 2x is the GCF they share. When we divide both parts by 2x, we'll get 3x minus 2. You group these two together, they both share a positive 5. So you take that out, that's going to be 3x minus, oh, look at that. Remember, we want twins every time. So that's what equals 0. Now the next move in factoring, if you remember, is 2x plus 5 becomes its own binomial, and then the 3x minus 2's come together. And there we are. So I'm going to erase this chart because it's kind of crouching my style here. Now this is the part where I would expect all of you to be able to get to without any real new knowledge. Like this is exactly what you guys have done the last 2 lessons. But here's the beauty of this, all right? The beauty is we took something that it had we're adding or subtracting 3 different terms. You can't get x by itself doing it that way. However, now that we've created multiplication side by side, which must equal 0, it's not like a can it equal 0? It must equal 0. So think about it like this. If I have 2 unknown numbers and I multiply them and 0 is the product, what must be true? That guy's got to be 0. Or that one's got to be 0. It's called the zero product property, meaning that if you multiply any stretch of terms or numbers or whatever, so if I said, let's go over here for a moment. If I said, let A times B times C equal 0, can you guys see that? You sure can. Then that means that, well, hey, A's got to be 0 because you can't multiply, get 0, and not have one of them be 0. But it could also be B. Or B could be 0. Or C could be 0. That's called the zero product meaning multiplication, property. So we have this in our back pocket to be able to kind of point out these 2 truths. That this one, it's got to be 0, or that one's got to be 0. All right, so then what do? We now solve these very, very simple equations. Get x by itself, minus 5 from both sides, divide by 2. All right, so x is equal to negative 2.5, or you add 2 to both sides, divide by 3, or x equals 2/3. And that's our solution. So we're factoring. We come up with a factored polynomial. It's being compared to 0. And now we've had the zero product property thing floating around that allows us to split these factors into 2 different parts set equal to 0 because one of them's got to be 0. And these are our 2 options as potential answers. All right, let's try this on another one. Now that we've got our footing a little bit more, this should be getting a little easier. All right, so I threw something different at you on this one. I made it so that 0 was not by itself. So you got to get 0 by itself first. We can't use the zero product property if there's no 0. So I would advise just moving everything over to the 7x squared. So you're going to add 24x to the right and to the left. And then subtract 16 from the right and the left. So that zeroes out the right-hand side. But by the way, you can zero out the left-hand side. It doesn't have to be the right. I kind of think people usually do better when they do zero out the right. So 7x squared plus 24x minus 16 equals 0. I want you to pause the video and try to now factor this on your own. All right, you've given it a try. Let's see how you did. So I can't factor this, and I don't want to rearrange it. So it's 7 times negative 16. our AC would be negative 112. Our B value is 24. All right, so I don't know what this is off the top of my head. I know it's not going to be 1 and negative 112. And it's probably not going to be 2 and 56, right? So does it divide 3? No, it doesn't divide 3. Does it divide 4? Oh, I think it's 4. Okay, I think it's negative 4. Is it 28? Does that work? 28 times 4. Bingo, got it. Okay, so now we split the middle up into, I'm going to group the 28 with the 7 and the negative 4 with the negative 16. So this is going to be 28x, yeah, minus 4x. And then that's 7x squared plus 28x minus 4x minus 16. Group these together and you get, take out a 7x, you're left with x plus 4. Take out a negative 4, you're left with x plus 4. Group them together so you get 7x minus 4 times x plus 4. Remember, this whole thing equaled 0 from the get-go. And now, we use the zero product property to split apart 7x minus 4 equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0. Let's get a new marker here. So where do we have room? So 7x minus 4 equals 0 here. And you got or x plus 4 equals 0. That's what the zero product property means. It means that this term must be 0 or this term must be 0 if they're multiplied together. So you add 4, divide by 7. X equals 4/7. Or, subtract by 4, x equals negative 4. All right. I don't know if we're ready for 4 yet. Let's try this. Ooh, this looks different. All right, once again, 0 is not by itself. But that's not much of a bother. All we got to do is subtract all those elements over. 0 is now going to be on the right-hand side. 20x squared. I see 12x minus 6x. I'm just going to call it 6x. And it's positive. Minus 2 equals 0. Right away, I see that you can divide everything by 2. So I'm going to factor that 2 out. 20x squared divided by 2 is 10x squared. 6x divided by 2 is positive 3x. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Now I've got a pretty simple polynomial inside there that's going to factor. So my AC is negative 10. My B is positive 3. That's 5 and negative 2. So this is going to split up into 5x minus 2x. Bring the minus 1 down, bring the 10x squared down, put a plus in front of the 5x. I'm going to actually leave this 2 alone for now. When we group them together, you get 5x times 2x plus 1. I'm going to take out a negative 1 here to create the 2x plus 1 for the leftovers here. So 2x plus 1. Remember, this whole thing's going to equal 0, but I'm just kind of focusing on the factoring right now, so I don't have to put the equal 0 down on every single step. I'm not going to be that nitpicky. So here's what happens. It culminates into 5x minus 1 times 2x plus 1, and then there's a 2 on the outside here. And that whole thing equals 0. Now this one involves a little bit more of an explanation, and my time on the first video is running out. So I'm going to stop the video, and I'm going to start it off exactly where I left off.